Well, on the African scene, we see Conakry. A year has passed since Omar Sila and Mamadou Biloba, two members of the civil society coalition Front National de Defense de la Constitution, which is the FNDC, were forcibly disappeared in Guinea. Their fate remains unknown. The silence surrounding their whereabouts reflects a growing pattern of enforced disappearances and repression that continues to shape political life in Guinea and mirrors troubling trends across several African states. Now, the FNDC, once a vocal civic movement advocating for a constitutional order and a return to civilian rule, was officially dissolved by Guinea's military authorities in 2022. Now, despite its bans, some of its leaders continued to mobilize public demonstrations, including one planned for July 11th, 2024, aimed at protesting media repression and authoritarian overreach. Just days before that protest, on July 9th, National Coordinator Omar Sila and his colleague Mamadou Bilouba were abducted. The disappearance has since drawn alarm from right groups and international observers. Authorities have consistently denied holding the two men, and there has been no formal update on their case. Human rights organization Amnesty International has raised concerns that such victims of abduction have been subjected to torture and inhumane treatment. Guinea's chief prosecutor had announced the opening of an investigation into several cases of disappearances, but 1 year later, no findings have been released to the public. The case of Abdul Sako, another prominent activist who was abducted more recently, has reignited fears. In response, Guinea's Bar Association issued a strong statement condemning what it described as a climate of terror taking root, coupled with an alarming silence from the judiciary. Now, this is not the first time Guinea has witnessed crackdowns on dissent. The country has a long and complex political history marked by transitions between military and civilian rule, often accompanied by unrest, repression, and contested legitimacy. Enforced disappearances where individuals are secretly abducted or imprisoned by the state or its agent with no acknowledgement of their fate have long been a tactic used to eliminate opposition, silence protests, and create fear. Sadly, Guinea's current trajectory echoes a broader pattern seen across several African nations, where dissenting voices, be they journalists, lawyers, civil society leaders, or political activists, face arbitrary arrest, intimidation, or worse, in such environments, criticism of government policies, calls for accountability, or demands for democratic processes are often treated as threats to national stability rather than as legitimate expressions of civil engagement. Now, while every country's situation is unique, the suppression of civil liberties is in response to activism, particularly in transitional governments or military-led regimes, often leads to increased instability rather than the calm or control that such actions aim to produce. Where citizens cannot freely express grievances or advocate for reform, trust in public institutions erodes and polarization deepens, as well as radicalism taking root. Now, the long silence surrounding Sila and Ba's fate speaks volume about the state of justice in Guinea. Despite public declarations of investigations, the lack of transparency and accountability signals a troubling erosion of the rule of law. When institutions meant to protect citizens, like the judiciary, remain silent or complicit in the face of such human rights violations, the space for lawful redress narrows dangerously. Moreover, the persistent repression of dissent undermines public confidence in democratic processes. Guinea, like many countries navigating fragile transitions, faces a critical choice: continue down a path where civic participation is criminalized, or allow for open dialogue, legal reforms, and inclusive governance. While the international community has in the past called for greater respect for human rights in Guinea, particularly following coups protests, and contested elections. But the fate of Sila, Ba, and others remain a reminder that without internal reform and consistent external pressure, calls for justice may fall on deaf ears. Now, as Guinea's military authorities continue to resist setting a clear timeline for elections and a return to civilian rule, the cost of silence only grows heavier. Every unacknowledged disappearance chips away at the nation's democratic potential, and fellow citizens waiting for answers that may never come.